My name is Russ Lowenthal. I'm with Database Security Product Management here at Oracle. I'm joined today by Ashok Swaminathan. Ashok is the product manager for Audit Vault and Database Firewall. And our topic today is the latest release of Audit Vault and Database Firewall, version 20.3, which even though it is just a dot release, what you're going to see is we've added a new capability to this version of Audit Vault and Database Firewall that's pretty significant. Just a reminder, these calls are recorded. The recording for this should be up on the Ask Tom website within a couple of days after we finish here. We do these calls every month, usually the second Wednesday of each month. This is a new day. Up until this month, we were doing on the second Thursday of the month. And these will be at 9 and 1800 US Central. As we go through today's session, if you have questions at any time, please enter them into the Q&A applet you'll see down at the bottom of your screen. You are not limited to today's topic, so not just Audit Vault and Database Firewall, but we're really here to answer any of your questions about database security. Before we get into the Audit Vault and Database Firewall, though, just a quick update. We only have one product update this month, and that is for the Oracle database. We released last month our quarterly patch, and this will take, if you're running on 19C, which is our current long-term release, this will take you to version 1910. In this quarter's release update, there are 12 new security patches. Highest score, this CVE score this quarter is just a 7.7, and there are no client patches that you need to contend with. There is one really nice little gift if you're applying the release update rather than the release update revision, and that is that in this quarter's release update, we have updated our cryptographic libraries, and we have made a change that significantly improves the performance if you are using FIPS 140 mode. And when I say significantly improved, with the limited testing that I've seen so far, we're talking an improvement of about 3x. So in the past, there was definitely a penalty that was incurred when you implemented FIPS mode. Now with release 1910, that goes away. So we're really happy to get this out the door. If you haven't already started planning your quarterly patch cycle, you should take a look at it, look at the vulnerabilities, and make your own assessment about when's the right time to move forward with this. The MOS note you see here at the bottom of your screen, this will have details on which patch download and just a little bit more information about what's going on in this quarter's release update. In the document corner, we have several updates this month. For today's topic, Audit Vault and Database Firewall, just a quick thank you to Punraja from Comcast. Punraja worked with us to improve the instructions for upgrading Audit Vault and Database Firewall. What Punraja found was there were a couple of places where the order we were presenting things in wasn't the most efficient way to get the material across. So we've completely rewritten that section of the documentation, and we're already seeing good results from that with the customers that are using it. We also did some rewrites on the Key Vault 21 Administrators and RESTful Services Guide. You may remember that last month I let you know that you should stick with the HTTP version for now because we are still getting it updated. There's so much new in Key Vault 21. I would say that is still true for this month. If you're one of those people who likes to download the PDF and just refer to it offline, I would give it another month before you do that and stick with the web version. But the Administrator's Guide, RESTful Services Guide, much better shape, and you'll see a lot of new information in there. In the Database 21C Security Guide, the section on gradual database password rollover has been updated to remove some confusion about how GDPR works with real application clusters. Before the rewrite, you could read it one way and think that maybe we didn't work with RAC and read it another way and think that we did. Now it's very clear, gradual database password rollover does work with real application clusters. Last update is with DataSafe. We added a new section in the reference chapter, that's chapter 10 of the Using DataSafe guide, that talks about what information is stored in DataSafe and how you can control what information moves into that DataSafe repository. This is especially important for those of you that are using DataSafe with your on-premises databases. Gives you a great way just to see what data is going and how we deal with that data. And that's it for announcements. Let's take a look at today's technical topic. And again, we're focusing on Audit Vault and Database Firewall 20.3. Before I dig into what's new in this latest release, I just want to review very quickly what Audit Vault and Database Firewall is and what most people use it for, just some of the use cases. And then we can talk about this new use case that we've enabled with 20.3. So Audit Vault and Database Firewall is our database activity monitoring solution. This is really the only thing you'll hear us talk about on the database security office hours that is heterogeneous. Audit Vault and Database Firewall works with Oracle, with SQL Server, with Postgres, with Mongo, with Sybase, pretty much any relational database, or really anything that produces an audit trail can work with Audit Vault and Database Firewall. Out of the box, we support most of the common operating systems, and we provide you the capability to easily create your own custom collectors. Our current release of Audit Vault and Database Firewall is release 20. It's hard to believe this time has passed so quickly, but this was released July of last year, so it's already 8 months old, soon 9 months old. Audit Vault 20 was a very significant rewrite from the previous release, which was Audit Vault 12.2. And there was so much in there. The user interface was completely rewritten, much more intuitive, easier to work with. For Audit Vault users, we added support for Active Directory integration, which a lot of our customers have been looking for. We added in support for Postgres. We added in new connector support for things like MongoDB and JSON. We improved how we work with RAC, just a ton of new things in this release of Audit Vault and Database Firewall. Now, when you look at Audit Vault and Database Firewall, the most common use cases, the things that most people will use it for, are pretty obvious. The name kind of says it all. The most common thing people use Audit Vault and Database Firewall for is to connect into your databases, extract the audit trail from your databases or your database servers, move that into a repository for analysis and reporting. We recently did a survey of a lot of our customers, and what we found is, of the customers we surveyed, 100% of them were using Audit Vault and Database Firewall for this use case, the most common use case. The next most common use case, which you're most likely to use Audit Vault and Database Firewall for, is the second part of the name. There is a component to this product that is called the Database Firewall that sits out on the network and monitors traffic as it goes from database clients into your database servers. And it's able to pluck those SQL statements off of the wire, do some analysis on them, and again, reporting, analysis, alerting. And if you configure it to do so, the database firewall can do what its name suggests. It can actually block things from getting to your database that you don't want there. This is less common than auditing, which almost everybody uses. SQL traffic monitoring, around 40 to 50% of customers were using this feature. Now, the number one reason for one of these activity monitoring systems is to collect data and analyze and report on that data. Audit Vault and Database Firewall has always been really, really good at this. And this latest version, we did a lot to improve that. So as you're going through looking at the reports in Audit Vault and Database Firewall, you'll see they run faster, they look cleaner, they're just more responsive and easier to work with. But you're not limited to just these reports. There's the ability to customize those reports. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. There's also the ability to completely ignore the reports and simply connect into the Audit Vault and Database Firewall repository with the analysis tool of your choice. That could be SQL+, it could be SQL Developer. You could connect in with an ODBC connection using Excel spreadsheets, whatever analytics tool you want, and take a look and chop the audit data and make it do whatever you want it to. I had a really interesting case actually just yesterday, where one of our customers is collecting around 70,000 audit records per hour. That's a lot of data to chop. And what they found was, with that much data going through a GUI interface was a little bit challenging, but we showed them how to hook in with SQL Developer, a couple of analytics queries, and they're printing beautiful reports, exactly what they want. So this is just an area where Audit Vault and Database Firewall really shines. I don't want to downgrade or dismiss the canned reports, because we put a lot of work into these. Ashok's team has worked with some of the largest auditing firms in the world to create compliance reports that are what auditors are looking for, to create security reports that will help you in a forensic investigation. There's a lot of good stuff here. I'm just saying you're not limited to those reports. One report almost everybody likes is the Privileged User Activity Report. What have the DBAs been doing? What has DBA been doing? Very, very easy to work with within Audit Vault and Database Firewall. So those are the main use cases. If you're using Audit Vault and Database Firewall, that's the stuff you're using. And what you're going to see is that it's just a little bit faster in 20.3. In addition to those, though, there are some little hidden things that Audit Vault and Database Firewall does that you may not know about. And I just want to cover a few of those before we get again to the real treat, what's new in this latest version. So we're going to hit 4 use cases here. One of them, kind of obvious: forensic analysis, reporting and analysis. Audit Vault and Database Firewall's ability to take a lot of audit data, because databases can produce a ton of audit information, and easily chop through that data and identify what's interesting or what's important is just really one of the things that stands out about it when you look at it compared to other things that do similar work. So it doesn't matter what your database is, Oracle, SQL Server, Mongo, Postgres, doesn't matter. That information is coming in, and it's all available through something called activity reports. Now, activity reports, it's just what it sounds like. It's a report of all the different activity. But imagine this: you're trying to find what's interesting in a system where you're getting 70 or 80,000 transactions per hour. Going through that can be challenging. So Audit Vault and Database Firewall gives you very simple query capabilities to where you can go through and say, well, I just want to see things that are hitting this database, and I just want to see things that are hitting this table, and I just want to see things that are coming from this IP address, or I want to see only statements that are failing. And so filtering within Audit Vault and Database Firewall is a powerful way to take a lot of information and quickly get it down to just what you're interested in. Okay. So if you haven't played much with the Audit Vault and Database Firewall reports, then take a look at filtering, take a look at what you can do with grouping expressions, and you'll find it's just an extraordinarily powerful tool. I mentioned earlier, we have an open schema you can get in with your own tools. Sometimes people get so caught up in doing things that way, they forget about the powerful reporting features that are built into the tool. Next thing we want to look at is a couple of interesting capabilities, and these are user entitlements reporting and stored procedure auditing. Let's hit stored procedure auditing first. Your database has hundreds of stored procedures. Even if you've never created a single stored procedure, we ship with hundreds of stored procedures. And these procedures have a lot of things that they allow you to do. And normally, stored procedures don't change from day to day. The only time you're really going to see changes in the stored procedures that we ship is perhaps during a patching cycle. We may patch a stored procedure to a different version. If you're creating your own stored procedures, custom stored procedures, again, those generally, you put them in, you get them working, and once they're where you need them, you don't change them. Well, when database attacks occur, when someone's trying to break into your database, the most common way that they're going to do that is they're going to break in using valid credentials. They'll manage to log in with stolen credentials or brute force credentials or guest credentials, and they're now into the database as a regular user. If the user they've compromised has the ability to create or replace a procedure, in other words, to take an existing procedure and change it to something different, then a common attack pattern is to embed some malicious code in that procedure. That malicious code might send some data outside of the database. It might create a user with a default password that the attacker knows about. It might, reverse an access control decision. It might turn audit policies off. It can do lots of different things. So What stored procedure auditing does is it examines your stored procedures, it looks at the content of those stored procedures, and it creates a cryptographic hash of the stored procedure content. And the next time you run stored procedure auditing, you do that again. And what this lets you do is it lets you quickly compare your last run of stored procedure auditing with your current run of stored procedure auditing and report on anything that has changed. If something has changed and you weren't in a patch cycle and you didn't change it and there was no change ticket for it, then this is a stored procedure that should be examined. Why did this change? Review your audit trail, find out what's going on. So this minor little capability to detect changes to stored procedures is enormously important from a security standpoint. It's also pretty handy, and I'm sure you've all run into this, for the cases where somebody changes a stored procedure and all of a sudden the application that depends on that stored procedure stops working. Now you have, okay, I can see it changed. I can find the audit record where it was changed. I know exactly when it was done and who did it. It makes it a lot easier to back those changes out. Okay, so that's stored procedure auditing. The second thing I want to cover real quickly is entitlements reporting. We all have databases. Databases have a lot of users in them. Those users tend to have a significant amount of privileges to them. And most of us periodically have to review the users in our database and what privileges they've been granted. That can be a really challenging task if you've got a lot of users, you've got a lot of privileges to look through. And if you're doing this monthly or quarterly or semi-annually, I don't care how frequently you're doing it, you're seeing the same things over and over and over again. And it, looking through all that information gets to be challenging. With user entitlement reporting, you can produce those reports, and that's a nice thing that we can produce the reports. But for me, even more importantly, is user entitlement reporting allows comparative reporting. Look at the screenshot I've got here, and you can see I'm comparing a user entitlement report that I ran a little while ago, and I've said that's my baseline, with my latest report. And what shows is just the differences, what changed, okay? So the ability to not have to look over every user and every privilege in the database and just review what's changed since the last time you did your review makes life so much easier if you're in an organization where you have to do privilege reviews. There's another little hidden gem inside of Audit Vault and Database Firewall. Now, this one has actually been around since Oracle 10, but it's one of the lesser used features of Audit Vault and Database Firewall. And that is the ability to track data modifications. And what I mean by data modification is, suppose you've got a table and it's got a column, maybe it's a finance table and it says, here's your account balance. Well, you might want to see what was Russ's account balance yesterday and the day before yesterday and the day before yesterday. When did it change? And when it changed, what did it change from and to? This is what tracking data modification refers to. You can tell Audit Vault and Database Firewall to look at individual columns of data and capture every change that's made so that you can report on those changes. We've been doing this, as I said, since Audit Vault version 10, but up until Audit Vault 20, we did this using Oracle Streams. Now, Streams was a great tool in its time, but by today's standards, Streams is really, really out of date. And in Database 19C, Streams is actually de-supported. With Audit Vault 20, we changed from using Streams to where now what we're doing is, instead of mining our redo with Streams, we're mining it with Goldengate. We'll set up a Goldengate extract from our redo logs. We'll take that extract and send it to an XML audit trail. So Goldengate just spits out the information into XML files, at which point Audit Vault and Database Firewall picks that information up from the XML files and loads that into the Audit Vault repository for before and after reporting and analysis and alerting. Now, here's what's really nice about that. Your speed and throughput is significantly higher with Goldengate than it was with Streams. From a supportability standpoint, not that you're ever going to have any problems with any of our stuff, but if you did have to file the odd SR or two, it's a lot easier for support to understand, oh, there's something wrong with Goldengate, or oh, there's something wrong with Audit Vault, because there's a nice clean delineation between what's doing what. It just makes supportability much easier. And Ashok is probably going to reach through the phone and choke me for this one, but here's what I'm secretly hoping. Right now, tracking data modifications, well, it's not too much of a secret since I'm going to tell you, but right now, tracking data modifications, that's an Oracle database feature. You can only do that with Oracle database. It made sense. Up until now, we depended upon a database feature, streams, okay? Now we're using Goldengate for this. Goldengate's heterogeneous. So if I can really persuade Ashok that this is something worth doing, maybe sometime in a not too distant release, we will see tracking data modifications for non-Oracle databases, maybe for SQL Server, maybe for other databases. So, but all of this capability starts with the re-architecture that we did in Audit Vault and Database Firewall 20. From a reporting standpoint, this is what your before and after values reports look like. All right, we're getting really, really close to the good stuff, what came new, but there's one more thing I want to tell you about that's new in Audit Vault 20, and that is the ability to create custom collectors for realistically any kind of audit trail that a modern IT system is going to produce. Here again, we've had the ability to create custom collectors in Audit Vault for a very, very long time. But up until Audit Vault and Database Firewall 20, what we did was we allowed you to create a custom collector that would go out to a database table. If it was anything that had a JDBC driver, we could do that. We could work with it and read the audit data out of that table. And you would just create a simple mapping file that would say, this column in the table maps to this column in Audit Vault. This column in the table maps to this other column in Audit Vault. Worked like that. That's been around forever. XML files, if something spits out audit information into a well-formed XML file, it's got the beginning and ending tags like XML should, then again, we can say this XML attribute maps to this column within Audit Vault and Database Firewall, and we could read that in. What's new in Audit Vault and Database Firewall 20 is that we now support collection over JSON. So if something is writing audit information to a JSON object, we can read that in. We also support, I need to update my slide here. We also support connection via REST API. Now, if you think about it, almost any system you're using today, I don't care if it's what it is, database, application, but almost anything, if it's producing an audit trail, that audit trail is going to be able to be read through a database table, through an XML file, through JSON, or it'll be exposed as a REST API. Now, the advantage of this is if you're going to use Audit Vault and Database Firewall to read audit data for something that wasn't the default collectors, the stuff we ship with, then your task to do that just got a whole lot easier. You used to more frequently have to go out and write Java-based connectors. We do ship a Java SDK for that, but with the current collector architecture, you almost never have to do that. For custom collectors, very, very quick. All you do is you define a manifest that describes what the collector is. I'm reading from application X and it's application X version 12345. You define a mapper that says application X puts something into column ZY3 and ZY3 just happens to be event time. And ZY4 just happens to be object that was acted on. So you map the different columns, and then you package that up and deploy it out to your Audit Vault agents, and they can now collect from the system. All right, that catches you up to date on Audit Vault 20. What's new? Well, since we released Audit Vault and Database Firewall 20 back in July of last year, we've had 2 release updates. Release Update 2 late last year, and Release Update 3 just a few weeks ago. Release Update 2, the majority of what you saw in there was around stability. It was a fairly significant rewrite, so we fixed a lot of things. We maybe added a couple of targets in. But Release Update 3 has a major new feature, and that's what we're going to spend the rest of today talking about. And that is, with Release Update 3, the database firewall component of Audit Vault and Database Firewall doesn't just capture the fact that someone did a select statement, right? What's going into the database. It also looks at what's being returned from the database and tells you how many rows did that select statement hit. Now, again, think in terms of real world attacks against data, right? If you've got an application that's pulling data from the database, it's usually pulling maybe a screen at a time. So, 10, 15 rows or single row queries, things like that. That's how applications normally behave. If suddenly you see that application pull back 1,000 rows, well, that's not how the application normally behaves. Up until now, you would have had to spot that manually. But with Audit Vault and Database Firewall 20.3 and this new feature, we actually tell you, hey, count of rows for this query, 100, 200, 300, whatever it returns back. So really, really nice. Now, I want to show you this, and then we'll walk through kind of what it looks like. Let's see, just make sure that my system didn't time out here. Okay, so here I am. I'm logged into Audit Vault and Database Firewall 20.3 actually, and I have already configured my system to collect row counts. And here's how I did that. The first thing I did was I went to my database firewall policies, and I created a policy to look at data exfiltration, data leaving the database. Now, this is the world's simplest database firewall policy because I don't worry about setting up session context rules. I don't worry about setting up SQL statement rules. All I need is a database object rule. And in that database object rule, I tell the database firewall that I want to take a look at data manipulation read only. This is select statements. In other words, that's the only place where we do row count is select statements. For those select statements, I want to capture the number of rows that are returned. I change this box, which defaults to no, to a yes. And then I tell it which tables I want. Do I want to only look at the queries that have multiple tables in the same query, or do I want to look and count the rows for any query? I tell the database firewall which tables to look at. These are all the tables that have ever been selected. It trains the firewall on that. Because the firewall is looking over the network, it is very literal. So for example, here you'll see I have demo HR employees, and then I have employee search prod demo HR employees. You have to think of the different ways that the cable name might come in over the network. Audit Vault and Database Firewall 20 is not case sensitive for table names, but it's possible to have 1 million tables within a database with the same name. They're all in different schemas, and they all have completely different data in them. So schema.table name, and just in case you have someone coming in directly to the schema and not prefixing it with the schema name, just the table name itself. This is it. You create your policy. Once you create your policy, you're ready to begin looking at data. And so if we go and we take a look at the database firewall data, we can see that we have some people that have pulled back 2 rows, some that have pulled back 181 rows. And I just went into a couple of different client machines just to generate some activity. So what I did was run the same statement a bunch of different times. But we tell you exactly how many rows the statement returned. As with any audit event in Audit Vault and Database Firewall, you can drill in for more details, and you can see, well, they connected to PDB1. They were logged in as a user called Russ L. That's me. They happen to be working from a client called the DBSec Lab, which was on IP address. You can see that here. They ran a statement. It was successful, where they connected to the database as employee search prod and said to do a select statement. And their select statement returned 2 rows. And here's the statement that they ran. Okay. Nothing could be easier. You can go down a little bit further and you can see, let's just find somewhere else. Here I have a statement that came in from a different IP address. This time when I ran the statement, I was logged in as system. I was coming from a jump server that just happens to have an Oracle client on it. And I ran a statement that looks like this. And I said where bonus amount is greater than. I am set up to automatically mask literals. That's why you're seeing zeros in here. We don't want Audit Vault to store sensitive data. So by default, we do this. But again, you can see my query returned back 181 different rows. So This is all it takes. Set up your policy, tell it what database tables you want to retrieve row counts for, and then it's right there in your reports. Now you can also create alerts based on row count. And you can see that I have, well, let's start again with policy. You can see that I have several alerts that are showing up in my alert report, but those alerts are all on this exfiltration alert. And so here you see what an exfiltration alert looks like. And if you've worked with Audit Vault and Database Firewall before, the alerts probably look the same. What's different here is in the list of available fields on the right-hand side, there's just one new field. It's called row count. And so I've said to whenever someone queries and returns more than 20 rows, if they're getting one of my demo tables, the tables that I care about, then I want to generate an alert. My alert will be called, hey, there's a PI exfiltration alert. The description of it is somebody selected more than 20 rows, you know, pretty easy. Now, what this alert produces, what this policy produces when somebody does something they shouldn't, is something that looks like this. All right, we can see that someone has violated this alert condition. They've pulled back more than 20 rows. And here is the audit record that is proof of that. They were logged in as sys coming from this IP address. As with the other reports, you can drill down for more information so you can see the exact statement that was run. You get more information like they came in over the network, and if they had client identifier set or something like that, you would see it here. But it gives you all of the information you need to know who did it, when they did it, where they did it from. Okay. Now, that's really it. So what we've looked at is, again, it sounds minor. There is a new data attribute that can be captured. This is the row count attribute. That row count attribute can be visible in reports, and it can be used to set alerts. Okay, back to the slides. Take you through the same thing, but just in a slightly different fashion. All right. So again, we're working with firewall policies, and the policies that we're going to work with are object policies, policies on database objects that say to capture rows. In terms of what does it produce? It produces reports that give you row count. You can see that in the summary reports. You can see that in the detail reports. It produces alerts that tell you someone has violated whatever condition you want to use for your row count. Okay. Now, to set that policy up, I went into database objects, the database objects section of the firewall policy. I said I wanted to do data manipulation read only. Yes, for the select queries, and then the tables that I wanted to get. And again, remember, I picked both table name and schema.table name. Okay, so again, just kind of, parsing that out, very simple. We move from there to the alerts. And you've already seen that we can create a policy, and the only thing that's different in the policy is we now have an attribute called row count that we can base decisions on. That's really it for the new feature. It seems like a minor thing, and if we've done it right, you're going to find that it is a minor thing because it's great new functionality, but it's very, very easy to use. There are a few things that you're going to want to remember to use this new feature. The first one is this is a 20.3 feature. If you're running Audit Vault 20.1 or Audit Vault 20.2, this won't be there. You have to update to 20.3. Now, we released 20.3 the middle of January, right after last month's office hours, by the way, the same week even, I think on Friday. But if you downloaded 20.3 the week it was released and you haven't installed it yet, you should download it again. Ashok's team uploaded a new copy to the e-delivery server and to my Oracle support, just with a couple of things that they spotted right after it went out. So to get the latest, you should download the most recent version of 20.3. You'll be able to tell that you've got the correct version by looking at the release notes on either e-delivery or my Oracle support. There's a checksum in there that you can compare against your downloaded binaries. All right. It's the first thing to remember. Second thing to remember, row count is only done at the database object level. You don't get a row count from anything that is handled with a session context policy or a SQL cluster policy. These are areas that we're looking at for future expansion, but in this first release of the new feature, we only do row count for select statements using data manipulation read-only policies for objects, okay? Next thing to remember, database object name is case insensitive. It doesn't matter if your user types it in uppercase, lowercase, camel case, every other letter a different case, case insensitive, but the name itself is an exact match. That means Rust.table name is not the same thing as table name. So when you're deciding what tables you're going to collect row count for, do keep an eye out for that. I'm just making it a policy. I always do schema name.table name and then just table name. So I'm covered whichever way. And this one's probably obvious, but this only works for Oracle databases. This is not something that we've implemented outside of Oracle at this time. Okay. That takes us to the end. It's a relatively slow month, other than this fairly significant new feature. And I don't have any open questions at this time. Just a reminder, there's a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. Do go ahead and enter whatever questions you have in there. If you have no questions for next month, the office hours will again be on Wednesday. That'll be the 10th of March. And right now, the topic is scheduled to be basics for transparent data encryption. It's kind of funny. We did advanced database vault before we did basic database vault, and we did advanced transparent data encryption before we did basics. But after we did the 2 sessions on advanced use cases for transparent data encryption late last year, we had several requests that said, the advanced use cases are interesting, but people wanted just an update on basic usage of transparent data encryption. So that's what we plan on covering next month. If something big and new happens, we'll hit that instead. But for now, join us next month for TDE, which, by the way, is one of the most used database security features. So, it's good to cover.